Suppose.
Love how everyone's wearing hats at the moment.
Don't have a choice. My mates have been ripping me for this hat. I mean, ripping me. I never wear hats. I don't mind winter hats when it's cold.
Mate, my hair's
never
down here at my hair's down here at the moment, and it's an absolute mess. So I've got it. It's all tied up and hidden away.
Right. Oh, we're on. We're on. It's happening. Welcome to MMA UK. I'm live with Bradley Wharton. Brad, how's it going, mate? You okay?
It's going well, my friend. It's going well. Still surviving in lockdown.
We're on. It's happening. Oh, turn this off. So I'm under strict orders to ask you whatever the general public put on this comment. That is Peter's strict orders to an extent.
Let me just get the lawyers on the phone. Hang on a second.
So I will be to and fro from my phone.
It's just Peter taking the piss, isn't it? He's just going to be asking loads of silly questions.
Pretty much. Ben Correa, how are you? Ricky White wants to know if you do any impressions.
I could do a Ricky Wright impression, but it's not suitable for family entertainment, unfortunately.
Ben wants to ask if you answer any MMA questions. Well, pretty much, mate. That is what he specialises in. Speaking of which, I believe you're also in sumo wrestling.
Yeah, man. Like,
what's that about?
Well, I used to be into like quite a lot of sport when I was a kid, and I used to play a few different sports. But nowadays, I just sort of eat takeaways and drink a lot of beer and that. So I thought like sumo wrestling, that's like the aspirational athlete body that I can sort of aim for. The smallest guy in the top division of sumo at the moment is about 98 kilos. And I stepped on the scales yesterday. It was the heaviest I've ever been in my life. I'm about 90 kilos at the moment. So I'm nearly there. 3 more weeks of lockdown and I reckon I could do it. So it's all about having goals for yourself.
That's a pretty good goal to get in it. Just keep that fridge door open and you might get there.
That's it, mate.
Do you do any commentating on sumo or anything like that? You're literally just a bit of a fan.
No, like the thing with sumo is like professional sumo takes place in Japan and nowhere else. There's essentially one league for it in the world. And obviously they've got a team of commentators that are based in Japan. So they've got 3 Japanese guys and an Australian guy randomly who used to be a horse racing commentator in English language horse racing commentator in Japan. And he sort of stumbled into sumo with no background or history of martial arts or anything. But yeah, he's a really good commentator. So they've sort of just got their little core team over there. Now you get like amateur sumo that takes place in like places like the US and there's world championships and stuff. But yeah, there's not really like in the UK. There's not really many opportunities. I think it's one of those things, though. If the opportunity ever came up, that might be the only thing I'd ever quit MMA for.
How are you with your Japanese?
You know what? When I was a kid, I actually
No, you're not going to tell me you speak Japanese now. I'm not going to.
No, I'm not. No, I started learning how to write it. I used to get like import Japanese wrestling games. And of course, all the text in the game is in Japanese. So I bought 3 books of how to learn Japanese, and I think I read about 3 pages of one of them, and was like, "Nah, it's too hard." It's insane. They've got 3 different alphabets, and it just seemed like a bit too much like hard work for me. So unfortunately, my Japanese is not sumo standard yet. But who knows? We've got time, haven't we? We're in this lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you in an interview talking about the sumo, and you seem to, you know all the names and stuff like that. If you just got a really good memory, because I'm guessing with Cage Warriors and you need to know what's happened over the last, 100 events to an extent.
Yeah, like I think like with sumo, for example, it's quite easy because there's a tournament essentially every 2 months, so 6 tournaments a year, and it lasts for 14 days. And the Japanese state broadcaster does on their English language channel, which everyone's probably got. If you've got Sky or Virgin, you can search for I think it's called NHK World. It's normally with all the news channels. They do a 30-minute highlight package every day, and they literally just show the top maybe like 12 or 15 bouts. And, bear in mind the sumo bout lasts for less than 10 seconds usually. So it whizzes through them, and you see the same guys every day for 2 weeks. And then, of course, you've got like 2 months off then to sort of, get yourself built up, get yourself excited for the next one. So it's a really easy sport to get into. You can just jump into it for 2 weeks, half an hour a night, or, just catch up on it, of a weekend when you've got nothing to do of a Sunday afternoon, just stick all the highlights on. And I just find it's dead easy to just, keep up with where everyone is. As far as MMA goes, like with Cage Warriors, I watch so much of it. Like when I'm getting ready for a card, if there are guys that I don't know, guys that maybe like fighting for the first time on Cage Warriors, I'll go and try and find out as much footage as I can of them. So like there's usually stuff on YouTube. If they've fought in the UFC before, there might be a few fights on Fight Pass, but I'll probably know who they are anyway. Yeah. So it's just a case of like familiarizing yourself more with what they do than who they are. So, if a guy's like definitely going to start getting tired in the third round because he's had cardio issues before, that's something to keep at the back of your mind. If a guy as always shooting for double leg takedowns, that's something to keep in your mind. I don't tend to make notes, but I try and, with the guys I don't know, I just try and watch as much as I can on sort of like the week or so leading up. And then, I guess I can just sort of keep that in the old memory bank and pull it out when needed.
I'm worried about asking another one from Ricky Wright here. What does basho mean when you talk about sumo? I hope that's a normal question. I've not just said something really rude in Japanese.
No. So basho is short for hon basho, which is tournament basically. So the 2-week competition is called the hon basho, but they just shorten it to basho, which is a funny word, let's be honest, because it kind of sounds like bashing one off.
I've got a quite reasonable question from Peter Knox. Who does the best impression of unbelievable? Not me. I've just proved that one.
Probably Rob Nutley, who I stole it from in the first place. No, I didn't steal it from Rob Nutley. But to be honest, like I do now, but I didn't used to do it on purpose. Like I kind of do now because it's just a funny thing that sort of stuck with me, and I'll probably never be able to get rid of it. But I genuinely didn't. If you go back to the first sort of Cage Warriors shows that I did, I don't do it as often, but I did kind of still do it. But it was just like an involuntary you've got to say something, right? You can't just be like, "Oh fucking hell!" You've got to, you've got to say something that can be repeated, something that can be broadcast. So I don't know if I maybe picked it up subconsciously, but Rob Nutley, who's a long time UK MMA commentator, one of the top guys going back to the early days of UCMMA and those sort of shows, he used to do that a lot as well. And again, I don't know if he did it on purpose or if he just did it when you get excited about something like I started doing it. But yeah, I suppose I should give Rob Nutley all the credit. Really, that's where it came from.
Yeah, give him the shout out. So it's nothing you can put a patent on.
Unfortunately, not. No, I can't make t-shirts, but then who'd want a fucking Brad Wharton t-shirt at the end of the day? Jeez.
Peter would definitely have one, 100%.
I mean, I could probably get one made just for him.
He actually has to have a drink every time you say it, so he ends up pretty pissed every time Cage Warriors is on.
I wish I could have a drink every time I said it on Cage Warriors, but it'd probably be frowned upon.
Got one from Mason Shatwell. What's the best fight you've ever commentated on? Good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Man, that's really tough. There's been so many good ones on Cage Warriors over the years. The Josh Reed, Nathaniel Wood one was just absolutely insane. And for a 1-round fight as well, so much happened. There was so much drama. The atmosphere in the building that day was unreal. I don't know if you've ever been to that building, the Indigo at the O2, but it's like a theater. So everything's right down, all the seating areas looking right down on the cage. And then you've got a standing crowd at the front, underneath where the stage would be if a band was on.
Right.
So it's a weird, like almost like a concert atmosphere. And of course, Nathaniel, that's his hometown, so he's got the hometown crowd with him. Even if you're not there for him, as soon as you hear him getting announced as being from London, that's your guy. So all the casual supporters there that day would have been supporting him, and the Welsh just bring an army with them wherever they go. The guys that follow the Welsh fighters around the UK are absolutely incredible. Some of the best fans in the sport. So there was a huge atmosphere in the building, and as a commentator, you can't really help but feel that. What I try and do a lot of the time, especially when it's guys like Paddy Pimblett or Jack Shaw, guys who've got a huge groundswell support with them, I take one of my ear defenders off, because the ear defenders we wear block out the crowd sound completely. Yeah. So all I can hear is what's being broadcast out to the TV, and obviously like the producers and directors and stuff. So we hear the crowd noise as you hear it on TV, but in the building, as you'll know from going to fights yourself, it's very different. So what I kind of do is take one off and leave one on, and listening to the crowd in that fight, and that moment where it turns, where Josh just gets caught with that one punch that sends him staggering back, like the adrenaline that you get from that, absolutely insane. So I definitely put that up there. There's one from FCC many years ago, Ashley Reese versus Martin Chester. Anyone who wants to watch a good amateur UK MMA fight, search that one out. It's on YouTube. It's generally one of the best amateur fights I've ever seen. And again, one of those fights where you've got two huge crowds and then just some key moments where the momentum shifts. So you've got the one lot of fans get it all drained out of them, and the other lot of fans all come up on the other side, and you can't put a price on stuff like that.
Yeah. So going from both of them, you're saying have got good atmospheres and that. What was it like doing your last one at CW Manchester behind closed doors?
Bit quiet. It was like being at Bama show back in the day, man. Terrible, man. Terrible. Fuck him. It was weird. Like it was a really weird show. Like the whole atmosphere was strange. Just going up there, like I'm sure you probably read Cage Warriors did a lot of things differently on that show. And we're quite a sociable bunch, and usually on fight week, when the work's been done in the evenings and that, people will kind of socialize with each other and knock around with each other a little bit. But that sort of didn't happen at this show. It was before the lockdown, obviously, so all the pubs and bars and restaurants were still open, but you just kind of got the sense that it just wasn't the right time for it. So I just kind of went out with a friend on the Thursday night. Sort of had a quiet one. And then getting to the show on the day, it was very different than any Cage Warrior show or any show I've ever been a part of. The fact that there was no one there for starters was just weird. It wasn't even a case whereby all the fighters turned up and then just waited the turn. It was like some of the fighters turned up and then fought and left. So there was no one hanging around. There was no one to talk to. I got there maybe half an hour before the first fight started and literally had a 10-minute production meeting where we were all, I think you saw it, we were all sat in like a big circle in that horrible back room.
Oh yeah. In a nice warehouse.
In the freezing cold. And then just walked out, pretty much sat down and started. Maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes after getting there. And in terms of commentating, it's just odd, man, because I do a lot of like regional shows in the UK, and the first few fights, there's very few people there usually because it's the first time amateurs going on, and they've maybe got a few mates with them and the mum and dad and whatnot. But there's always someone making noise. There's always the noise of people talking in the background, and this was just like deathly silent. So it was, I wouldn't say more difficult, but I had to think a lot more about trying to keep the energy up because there's nothing to sort of prompt you to be like, oh,
yeah.
There's
bit more pressure to stop the silence bits.
Yeah. Dan Strauss, who I commentated with, a great commentator, especially when there's grappling involved. So he's happy to talk, and he probably talks more than Josh does. So it's kind of good for me in a way that I could just kind of sit and let him fill a lot of that airtime, which was fine. The oddest thing is it's really cool that you can hear the corners, you can hear everything that's being said. But the oddest thing is the fighters can hear you. And if you're looking up at them, I look at the monitor quite a lot anyway, and unless I can't see something from the angle, then I look at the cage. But when you're looking up and you sort of criticizing someone's takedown defense as they're getting taken down for the 10th time, and they just look at you like I know what's going on, man. And like even on the flip side of that, like you've got to be careful that you're not sort of coaching people out of a position, and you know that's kind of more down to Dan than me. You know, part of his job is to, you know, I would say to him, well, what does he need to do to get out of this position? Well, it's quite easy. What he needs to do is like posture up here, or you know, grab here, or trying to get a grip there, and the guys can hear you saying that, so you're effectively cornering them, which obviously.
It's a bit of a tricky one.
Is tricky, yeah. Especially, you know, if the guy on top's then like, hang on, dickhead, I'm trying to fucking win this fight here, and you're trying to tell him how to get out.
No way. So you don't, not really looking forward to any more closed events, which might be the way forward.
Honestly, mate, I would say I'm like as certain as I can be that the next few events will be close to the public. You know, I genuinely know as much as you or anyone else does in terms of like when Cage Warriors will come back. But obviously, you know, Graham's given interviews and tweeted that he's got a location secured. So whether that's Bowlers that we used last time or whether it's somewhere else, who knows? So I assume that as soon as the country's in a state where people can travel, and you know, maybe that might have to stretch to Europe as well if they've got people coming in. As soon as it's sort of safe to do that and legally possible to do that, I'm sure the shows will start again. But I just can't see there being shows with crowds in for a while now. And I think if you look back to Graham's original tweet on the matter, he said, you know, it's going to be months, so it might be like September, October, which if you kind of look, you know, through the media, and if you look at like concerts and sporting events that are being talked about and being planned, it all seems to be being pushed to sort of that last quarter of the year, you know, that back 4 months. People are saying maybe September. It's going to be really interesting, you know, man, because like Cage Warriors, for example, we've got dates booked because we had shows already announced for up until November anyway. Well, I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, it's going to be great, you know, let's say September, everyone can start doing shows again. Well, every band, every sport, everyone is going to want those same dates, the same venues. You know, all the musical artists use the same sort of venues that MMA promotions will use. You know, the UFC, for example, I don't think there's going to be a rebooked UFC London this year, because when are they going to get the O2 Arena? They need it from, you know, Thursday to Sunday to do all the rig up and takedown. It's not simply a case of finding a free Saturday. It's finding a free Saturday that's got a free Friday and potentially Thursday before it. So I don't think we're going to see a UFC London this year. I think realistically, Cage Warriors are probably going to be the only sort of you know, international level show that happens up until the end of the year, purely because we can do it without a crowd. I think the regional scene will be dead until October. And then there's going to be you know, regionally as well, there's going to be a big scramble because again, people use the same venues, they use the same commentators, refs, gyms, doctors. You know, everyone's going to want to get on, and crucially, it's the same fans. Like, you know, if you look in the north, you're obviously from the northwest of England, and you look how many shows are on in the northwest of England. How mad was March? There's a show every weekend, maybe one.
Literally every weekend.
You know, it's going to be exactly the same. Only no one's got any money at the moment because, you know, people have been working. People are having to tighten their, you know, tighten the belts a little bit. You know, if there's 2-3 shows every weekend in the same area, people just can't afford to buy tickets. And I think, unfortunately, I think you're going to get shows that survive this this lockdown, but don't survive the 4 months afterwards because they'll put a show on and lose money because they can't sell tickets. And as we know, a lot of the regional shows in the country, probably all of them, you know, they're only 1 or 2 bad shows and a few grand away from saying, you know what, it's not worth it. So hopefully there'll be some collaboration between shows, people talking to each other and just saying, look, we both run in kind of the same area. I'll do September, you do the end of October. You know, I'll do the early October, you do late November. And, you know, just a bit of working together, making sure that there's enough referees, judges and whatever going around so people aren't having to get their mate judging. And yeah, just collaborating a little bit and hopefully pulling together. But you know what UK MMA is like, so wait and see.
Anything can happen. No No whispers of Cage Warriors getting an island together then.
Honestly, mate.
Maybe an island. That might work.
I remember years ago, like about 2013 or something, Graham was going on about doing a show on like some sort of military ship or something out in like for the army or something. And he was like, "Yeah, we're gonna get helicopters to take the cage and put it on this ship, and then we're gonna do a show, and then we're all gonna leave." So who knows? Do you know what I mean? If anyone's gonna do something that ridiculous, Graham's the man to pull it off. Look, people had various different opinions on whether that last show should have happened, and I respect all those opinions. Some people didn't think it was a good idea. Some people thought it was fine. Each to their own. Personally, I was confident that it was safe and whatever. But crucially, I think a lot of people were waiting for something to happen to that show and waiting for it to be taken out of our hands and get pulled. And I think you've got to give Graham and also the guys who work in the office for Cage Warriors who aren't as visible as him, who don't get the credit. And I'm not going to name any names because I'll forget someone and then I'll get sacked or something. But there's a whole team of guys and girls who didn't know what was going to happen after that show, as far as how it's going to affect their employment, as everyone else in the country is dealing with. And in a tiny amount of time, moved the show from London to Manchester and got it done. So if there's going to be a fight island anywhere in the UK, I'd put money on someone like Graham and the Cage Warriors team putting it on.
Nothing to surprise you.
Oh man, mate, we did a show in Chechnya. Like I went through the mountains of Dagestan in a minibus with 3 armed lads in the middle of the night. Nothing will surprise me anymore.
I know Brian Lacey and Brad. I'm guessing it's been cancelled now. They were going to do one in Poland, I think, either an old abandoned prison or a cave. So, like I say, anything could happen.
Yeah, that was that bare knuckle thing, wasn't it? So it was like a Vale Tudo style bare knuckle MMA headbutt stomp.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next
Interesting. I to be honest, it's kind of the thing that morally you shouldn't really support stuff like that, but also kind of cool as well. So you kind of want to watch it. I don't think it'd get cleared by Safe MMA, put it that way.
No. Where are we up to on these questions? Brad is big enough for Wii Sumo. There you go. Not fancy Wii Sumo.
Wii Sumo.
You already know who's put that one. I don't even need to say who said that.
Hey, I'm getting there. I'm getting there slowly but surely. This lockdown has not been kind to me. Kind to me. It doesn't help that my Facebook profile pictures from 8 years ago as well, when they actually had a jawline and stuff, and now I'm just fat. So
Katie's asking me if I have any other clothes apart from MMA UK branded. I don't, Katie. This is literally what I live in: eat, sleep, breathe, repeat.
When I started out, when I first started covering the sport properly, the number of free T-shirts that I used to get was absolutely obscene. I remember turning around one day and thinking, I haven't actually gone and bought a new T-shirt in about a year because I've just got free clobber from MMA people. You don't get it so much anymore, mate. So enjoy it while it lasts.
Oh, it's not free. Don't be thinking this is free, Peter.
Has he made you buy it?
Oh, mate, it's not free. Don't make me laugh. Does Brad? Do you think Bellator's bigger than Cage Warriors in Europe?
I mean, it depends how you define bigger. Do they use bigger arenas than ours? Yes, they do. Obviously, that's a matter of fact. Bellator are backed by Viacom, so it's really like comparing apples and oranges in terms of the resources that they've got. I think there's probably a lot of comparison between Cage Warriors and Bellator because a lot of the Bellator Europe staff, David Green, Jude Samuel, obviously the president and the matchmaker, they used to be the Bama guys, and obviously there was a lot of comparison between Cage Warriors and Bama because essentially they were competing promotions, and I think that's probably carried over a little bit. And obviously because Bellator have signed a lot of domestic talent for the European series, those comparisons are there. I think it's a fairer comparison to compare Bellator to the UFC in terms of the resources those companies have got. But look, it's apples and oranges, and I think it's been talked about many times before. If you want to follow that path, get to the UFC and prove that you're the best fighter in the world in your weight class, well, that's the UFC at the end of the road, and Cage Warriors is the path to the UFC in Europe. If you're interested in making as much money as possible in a short amount of time as possible, then Bellator is probably the promotion for you. And it's not to say that either one of those journeys is less valid than the other. If I'm sat there looking in the mirror and saying, all right, I want to fight for the next 5 years, I want to get paid as much as possible to do so, Bellator is probably the best option in the short term. If I'm sat looking at myself as an 18-year-old man saying, 18-year-old young lad saying, I want to be the best in the world, I want to be the world champion, I want to be the undisputed number one in this sport, well, then it's the UFC. So your best bet to get there would be to go through Cage Warriors. So to say is one bigger than the other, I don't think it's a valid question, to be honest. I think it's kind of a pointless question. It's apples and oranges. It'd be like saying, is Cage Warriors bigger than Cage Warriors Academy or something? Well, in some ways, yes. But if you're an amateur fighter wanting to get, a good record behind you and the best in cage experience, you probably want to fight on the academy shows first, because that's where you're going to get matched up more regularly and have more opportunities. So it's apples and oranges. It depends very much on how you want to look at it.
It's a stupid question. Whoever asked that, stupid question, basically.
It's not a stupid question. It's not a stupid question. It's just one of those things. Like, MMA fans all over the world like that kind of conflict. I mean, when I first got into the sport, it was UFC versus Pride. And, this was before social media even existed. We were on the message boards back in the day, and you were either UFC or you were Pride, you were one or the other. And, some of the arguments and stuff and the ridiculous conversations and debates that went on are the exact same ones that go on today between, what's better, PFL or Rising, what's better, UFC or Bellator, or, fans just like being factionalized, because then you've got a common enemy and you can all gang up together and, feel like you're going in mob-handed on someone.
Fair enough. Good answer, to be fair.
I've been asked it before, you see.
I can't pronounce this guy's name, so I'm not going to ask the question. Sorry. Well, Katie Hunter thinks Nathaniel Wood versus Josh Reed's the best fight in Cage Warriors history.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Ooh, Ricky Wright, who's your pick to win the Journeyman 8-man tournament in October?
I'm a bit upset about this, because I was hoping the likes of John Spencer and Will Cairns, Tyler Thomas, and a few others might show the faces. But from what I understand, this Journeyman tournament is only guys who've never won. So a few of the sort of, the Reece Streets to the world, the John Spencer of the world, they wouldn't technically qualify because, they've ticket smashed a few guys before. I'm going to have to go for the real deal, Wes O'Neill.
Wes O'Neill. Kate's asking, what do you think of the use of journeymen in MMA? I think they're needed for a start, aren't they?
I mean, yeah, look. I don't even like calling them journeymen, because I think it's kind of disrespectful to the journeyman boxer, which is a much more honest trade, I would say. If you're talking about the guys, the divvies who will turn up and fight 3 times in a weekend, and they'll jump into the cage piss for 200 quid and get clobbered, I've got no time for people like that. I've got a bit more time for guys like, Reece Street and all his guys, because they do actually train. Like Reece, for example, is a journeyman boxer himself. He'll go and do an unlicensed boxing match, and he'll go and take someone 6 rounds. There's definitely a need for that in boxing, and there is to an extent in MMA as well. And I think even if you look at Reece and his guys, they don't always go. I mean, they mostly don't go there with the intention of winning. They want to go and move around for a few minutes. And they're not going to let themselves take a pasting, so they'll take a knee, they'll tap out, they'll give an arm or a neck up or whatever. And look, I'm not a promoter as such myself, but I've been involved with FCC since the first show, and I've done sort of everything that a promoter would do, apart from spend my own money, which has been fantastic. But we've been in situations where obviously every show will have one or two journeymen on because people pull out at the last minute, and that's what you've got to do. I think what a lot of people don't realize, it's easy to take the moral stance and say, well, if an opponent drops out, just kill the fight, just don't have it.
Not that easy, though, is it?
And I think originally that was kind of the point of Safe MMA. They thought that everyone would take up on it, and then these journeymen wouldn't be able to fill in last minute because they wouldn't be able to get registered. But unfortunately, it's just not worked. It's just not worked out like that. What a lot of people don't understand, I think, from a fan's perspective, is how little money or how little profit margin there is on these local shows and regional shows. Funnily enough, the smaller local shows have actually got more chance of making money than the bigger regional shows. You're lucky really to make a break-even situation happen, or to make a small profit on these shows. So if I turn up on a Saturday and I've got a guy who sold 150 tickets and his opponent doesn't turn up, and I've got to give him that money back, you could be looking at the difference between your show breaking even or losing $2,000. And if you've not got $2,000, what you're going to do? Sell your car or stuff like that? I've been at shows where promoters have been in that situation after the weigh-ins on the Friday, where they've just been like, look, we're $5,000 down, so if people don't turn up on the day, I'm gonna have to sell my car, or this is the last show I'll ever run. I'll be at a cash point with the credit card trying to take money out to get people paid. And in that sense, I think a lot of UK MMA shows would have failed over the years if it wasn't for those journeymen, where you can just say, look, here's 200 quid, go in. I think it again comes down to like a bit of common sense from promoters. If you've got a guy turning up who know's fought somewhere the same night already and probably been TKO'd or whatever else, and he's turned up and he's clearly had a load of bloody sniff or a load of drink on the way. Mate, honestly, number of times I've seen it happen.
I've yet to see that yet, but I'm sure it happens.
Honestly, you stick around long enough, mate, and you'll see it. I've seen a guy on a show fight twice on the same show on the same night, and in between fights, go on Facebook and say he was like a welterweight, and he was like, "Oh, I've just been knocked out, done a gram of coke, and now I'm going to go and fight a light heavyweight for £200." It's stuff like that. When one of those guys gets hurt and gets killed, or a serious injury, that's what's going to really hurt MMA. If you look at stuff like Safe MMA and all the brain scans and everything, should the worst happen, which you would think at some point it might do, obviously no one wants it, but should the worst happen and someone gets seriously hurt or God forbid killed, as an industry we can turn around and say, well, these are the steps we put in place. These guys were matched well by a professional matchmaker. The records were even, the skill level was comparable. And before the fight, they've had a brain scan, they've had a thoracic scan, they've had a full medical examination. It was just a terrible accident. And the industry will recover from something like that, just as boxing does, because it happens every year in boxing. What it may not recover from in the short term is a guy who's 0-50 getting knocked out and seriously hurt by someone who's a professional athlete of some renown, and there's been no medicals, and the guy is seen drinking or taking drugs beforehand. That's the kind of thing we won't recover from. That's the kind of thing that will stop insurance companies insuring shows. It'll stop local governments giving licenses to events, which is what we saw in Ireland over the past few years, and the Irish scene's only just recovering. So I think, on the question of journeymen overall, they will always be there. There's a use for them. There's a need for them. But it comes down to common sense on the promoter's part. And I think in a situation where in England we're not regulated by the government, there's a lot of things we don't have to do, then we must police ourselves as an industry.
Would you ever fancy yourself doing a bit of matchmaking, or have you done so?
I've done a bit for FCC and stuff. That's Adam's job, obviously. But there's stuff where he'll send me a list of guys he's trying to get matched, and obviously I've got contacts in parts of the country where he maybe doesn't. And if it's the last minute and we're like, look, we can bring someone in from London and put them up in a hotel. I've done little bits and bobs, but I would certainly not say that I've ever acted as a matchmaker, and I wouldn't want stress, honestly. It's an absolute nightmare. I helped match a show many years ago, or it's a show that never actually happened in the end. But in about 2012, I helped match a show, and I was the first guy matching the fights for it. And it was a show that no one had heard of before, and it was an absolute nightmare. And seeing the stress that people like Adam go through, and honestly, like, you know, even at the Cage Warriors level, some of the stuff that, you know, you hear from people about excuses and you know, just dealing with people. I don't like people, I'll be honest. That's probably the main thing. I'm not a massive fan of dealing with human beings, so it's not for me. I think it's probably one of the most, if not the most stressful job outside of the cage in MMA. I think you've got fighting, reffing, and then matchmaking are the two biggest dangers to your health in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, like I say, whenever I go to him, you can see how focused all the team are on just trying to get the job done. Definitely looks stressed. See what else we got on the comments. Oh, it took me right to the back. Nathaniel Wood. Bad journeyman, aren't we? Chris Scadden, what is the craziest thing you've ever heard a fan shout out?
Oh man, that's a great question. So there was a fight on FCC once where I'm not going to mention any names because there's a chance that someone they know might be watching this and it's not very kind. But there was some guy who was getting absolutely pummeled, like he was getting a proper shoeing. And for some reason, his really, really drunk girlfriend had managed to get past security right to the cage where the commentary position was. And she had her hands through the cage and she was shouting at the opponent, "Get off him, you dickhead!" And it was just one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Like, what's he going to do? Just be like, "Oh shit, sorry, I didn't mean to. It was an accident." My favorite one of all time, like in general terms, is the put him in a body bag from Karate Kid, which is, if you've been to any UFC over the past 20 years, as soon as it goes quiet for the first time, you're guaranteed to hear someone say, put him in a body bag, or kick his ass, Seabass from Dumb and Dumber. That's always a good one.
Yeah. Nice. There you go, Chris. I shouted.
My man Chris Scadden not smoking for days as well. Big up, mate.
Oh, was Chris smoking?
Yeah, he's quit smoking.
It's hard.
Yeah, big respect, man.
Peter Knox, I shouted "kick her in the dick" at a Jojo Calderwood fight once.
Have you seen that video of the guy who does the old dick twist?
No.
I'll send it you. The old dick twist.
Jesus. Ricky Shock asked Brad what advice he'd give Dana White to ensure to avoid a potential COVID-19 second wave. He's finding this hilarious, so I'm guessing I'm missing some of it.
What you need to do, Ricky, what Dana needs to do is buy a private island and just make everyone live there forever. That's a private joke, maybe. You know.
Yeah. Best martial arts movie ever. Don't pick a shit one.
Oh man.
Pressure. This is a pressured question. This
Might be a controversial shout, but The Raid.
Oh, good shout. Is that the original or remake?
So there's two. There's The Raid and The Raid 2, both by the same director. The first one for me is the best, where they go into like it's like an old tenement building, like an apartment building.
Yeah.
And the guy at the top basically says, like, right, there's a bounty on their heads, so they've got to fight their way right to the top floor.
Brilliant film.
I think some of the fight scenes in that, and again, it's one of those ones where they use like fight teams who didn't use any like CGI or anything like that. There was very little manipulation done. That they must have been some hard scenes to shoot, because like you can see like they were really rough with all the stunts and stuff. So yeah, I love that. Rumble in the Bronx, Jackie Chan. Got to give that one a shout out as well.
Yeah, that's a brilliant one. But mate's not that old, is it?
Mate, honestly, it's like 2005 or something, which is like 15
Is it,
years.
yeah. Oh, that's not old for me. That's not old. That's not old for me. Have you ever had an MMA fight yourself, amateur?
Pardon?
Or in general, have you ever had an MMA fight?
I did some like inter-club stuff a long time ago when I was in my teens, but not like, I wouldn't say it was an amateur fight like an amateur fight is known today. Had some really bad knee injuries when I was a kid, so I've had 3 knee surgeries on the same knee. So that's like absolutely in bits. And to be honest, like when I got into my sort of early to mid 20s, I had quite an intense career and didn't have the time to put into any sports and stuff. So I went from being sort of like fairly sporty to not sporty at all. Like, I was working, I worked for a video games company for a while. So it was a company based in England, but the product was in America. So I used to work from like 2 in the afternoon till 10 at night or midday till 2 in the morning. So of course, like time for going to the gym and stuff, it just wasn't there really in the evenings. And I was sort of at the age where I was wanting to go out and party all the time as well. So my free time was spent doing that rather than sports. I never really got back into it. And now I'm old and fat and decrepit. So it's time has probably passed me by. I had a heart attack a few years ago. And I'm just sort of at the point where it was a very small heart attack and I was very lucky. Didn't even need a stent put in or anything. And I'm at the point now where I'm still sort of recovering from that. And I'm sort of hoping like maybe within the next year or so, I'll be able to start doing some sort of training, not to do any sort of competing or anything, but over the past like sort of 6 months to a year or so, it's been sort of getting me down a bit that I've put quite a bit of weight on that I've never really had before. And I just think doing something a bit positive physically, like just getting back and maybe even like just doing some jiu-jitsu or something. I think that'd probably be a good idea. But at the moment, I've got to be very careful. Like I can't even go for a run properly at the moment because my heart rate gets very, very high. So I'm on medication to keep it low. So like doing like intense workouts and that, like doing a grappling session, for example, is probably not the best way to sort of ease back into things. Yeah. So once I get my fitness back, when I'm sort of fit and able, I'll have to look for the old man group somewhere and have a go again.
You're not that old yet. How old are you?
I am 36 in a couple of weeks.
Oh, it's nothing, that. That is nothing. Asking if I got any questions. I've got loads, Peter, but I'm reading these out, mate. You told me I had to read them all out, so I'm reading them all out. Who's the GOAT? That's all it says. Who is the GOAT?
George St. Pierre.
Is that always been your answer?
No.
For the last 10 years, maybe?
It changes, man. But I think with George St. Pierre, like, he sort of, he had, like, the perfect career, if you like. He got in, he maximized, if you look at it as an industry overall rather than just individual fights, he got in, he maximized his earnings, and he got out at the right time. I think, he recognized that the tide was sort of turning against him, with like the fights against like Johnny Hendricks, for example. A lot of people say that he lost that fight, and he certainly had it taken to him like he'd never had it before. Carlos Condit nearly kicked his head off. I hate speculating about guys and performance enhancing drugs and stuff, but the tide was turning on that as well, and he kind of dipped out, and he dipped back in with Bisping, and then dipped out again straight away. And he's left the sport with his legacy intact, his health intact, and I think his run. Look, you can say that the fights got more difficult towards the end, but at the same time, he won them all. So you can't really fault that record. And yeah, you've got that loss to Matt Serra and Matt Hughes earlier on and everything, but really, on paper, probably the best career. You probably, you might be able to make arguments for other guys. And to be honest, you can. You could probably say, look, maybe it was Jose Aldo, maybe it was Fedor. You might even say it's someone like Sakuraba or Hoist Gracie from the earlier days whose achievements meant more overall in the history of the sport rather than just winning fights. They changed the way people perceived martial arts. A little skinny Brazilian guy in a gi, people thought martial arts was all flying kicks and spinning roundhouses and stuff. So, what Hoist Gracie did, you could argue that that's more important in terms of the impact of martial arts on culture and stuff. So maybe you say he's the GOAT, but I think modern day fans, it's just kind of like, oh, who won the most fights in the most dominant fashion? But for me, you know, you've got Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre, Fedor. I'll probably go with, if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably change my answer, but today we'll go with GSP. Why not?
Do you think he should come back for one more? Or do you think he should, or do you think he will?
That's a good question. Do I think he should? No. I mean, it's going to get harder every time he comes back, unless obviously we'll be able to pick his opponent if he comes back, and unless he picks someone who's maybe further down the pecking order, it's always going to get harder because he's going to be getting a little bit older and more inactive, and he'll be fighting younger, you would think, more active guys. So, you know, you imagine that he wouldn't be a favorite against someone like Khabib if he fought Khabib now. So I don't think he should. You know, in terms of his legacy, I think the way he's gone out, you know, was great. For him to come back and win that second belt and then go again, it's a fairy tale ending. And the last thing you want to see, as we've seen with so many guys over the years, is them keep coming back and then start losing, to guys that they shouldn't be losing to. Will he come back? Mate, if the money's on the table, anyone will. Like, it's prize fighting at the end of the day. And if they make him an offer that's good enough to change his morals, then yeah.
I think he'd probably only come back for that championship belt, won't he? And I think since Bisping, there's not a lot of people I'd probably put my money on GSP at the minute.
I mean, you know, you don't know who the champ's going to be in a few years, and this is the great thing about MMA. Like, you could be like, well, yeah, Khabib's the only fight there for him. Well, you know, what happens if Tony Ferguson knocks Khabib out in 30 seconds, and then Khabib fights Justin Gaethje, and Justin Gaethje knocks him out in 20 seconds, and the next guy knocks him out in 20 seconds. Well, all of a sudden, no one cares about GSP versus Khabib because Khabib's a bum now, and that's how the sport works. Unfortunately, it's not how it is, but that's how people see it. So that's the good thing about MMA, is that, you know, everything can change, and it might be the case now where you're saying like, oh, there's not many people you put money on Bisping, not many people you put money on GSP against, but 6 months, 12 months down the line, who knows?
That's fair enough. Roddy Hater, hi mate. Totally respect BJJ, boxing, judo, etc. But my discipline is Wing Chun. Should have read all this first. Wing Chun, there you go. Obviously, a lot of our techniques are illegal, but can you see some being more widely integrated into MMA?
Who the fuck is that? This?
Well, it's called Roddy Hater. I'm having a... Oh, it looks legit profile. Roddy Hater.
I don't know. I don't know a massive amount about Wing Chun. I'll be completely honest. I think like Bruce Lee's like theory on martial arts has always seemed to, you know, make a lot of sense to me. Is nothing probably exists without having at least one or two positive aspects that you could take from it and mold into something better. So I don't know about any of like the exploding heart techniques or anything that Wing Chun does, but yeah, maybe there's some kind of, you know, movement techniques.
Kick and claw and all that.
Yeah,
that definitely won't be allowed.
You know, I'll be honest, I'm not an expert in Wing Chun. Don't really care to be, so I'm probably not the right guy to ask this question.
In short, probably not then. In short, probably
no,
not.
big up Wing Chun. Big up Wing Chun.
Who do you think future superstars are going to be that are going to be coming over from Cage Warriors? Obviously, Conor McGregor has made that step from Cage Warriors to UFC, gone on to do his own thing. Who do you think, or is there anyone who you're 100% is going to make that jump at some point soon, or is there anyone who you think is going to have a good go at it?
Well, you know, like we were just saying, the mad thing about MMA is that everything can change in the space of a couple of fights. And anyone, you know, Conor McGregor had that fight with Cage Warriors on New Year's Eve. If he'd lost that and his next three fights, well, all of a sudden, you know, it's a completely different story. As for the guys in Cage Warriors at the moment who, like, I think people should keep an eye on, you know, I think it's probably, you know, fairly obvious that the guys at the top of the food chain at the moment. Reece McKee, you've got to believe he was maybe one fight away from getting signed for that UFC Dublin card that's penciled in for August. You know, if he'd fought in Belfast and won, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't have been signed. Obviously, we've just seen Mason Jones get a massive win over such a great opponent in John McColgan. John McColgan is one of my favorite guys to watch on the roster. So for Mason to stop him in the first round like that, and it was a competitive fight, but for Mason to stop him in the first round like that, that shows me Mason's the real deal. I know he wants to fight a UFC veteran next. Mason's definitely one to keep an eye on. Oban Elliott, he's only had a couple of pro fights, but my God, if it was all about talking and tweeting and trash talking gamesmanship, this guy'd already be a UFC champion. The kid's incredible. He's got that superstar quality about him, and you kind of get the feeling that he could maybe cultivate a fan base similar to the way that guys like Jack Shaw and Nathaniel Wood and Conor McGregor did. He could be huge for Welsh MMA. And obviously you've got guys like Ian Gary fighting out of Ireland under Team KF, who have got an incredible squad of young men coming up as amateurs. And you will have seen some of their amateur guys on Budo, I imagine, in the past 12 months. They've got the Shelley brothers, Taka Mandu, so many great guys coming out of that gym under Chris and Tom. Ian Gary's another guy. He's got all the charisma. He's got that superstar quality about him, and people seem to like him. You get the post-fight videos of his post-fight speeches. And I don't know if you saw the video we were talking about his granddad with dementia and singing "Imagine" by John Lennon with his granddad.
Right, no, I've not seen
stuff like that, man. The guy's just like charismatic and likable, and a really nice guy. And obviously, we know he can do the business in the cage. It's just a case of, for guys like Ian Gary and Oban Elliott, they just need 4, 5, 6 good pro fights, moving up in difficulty, just to aid their development along. And obviously, as we've seen with Cage Warriors over the past 10 years, that's the right place to do it. You're going to get those fights, the right fights at the right time in your development, and you'll get a company that will put you in the spotlight and give you the opportunity to make something of yourself.
Does it get a bit annoying seeing him leave? Obviously, you might have seen some people from the FTCs move up over to Cage Warriors, and you enjoy watching them. You know they're on the card coming up, you're excited about it, and then all of a sudden we've gone to UFC, and watching them anymore must be a bit of deflation felt when that happens.
It's like selfishly, yeah, because there's people who've fought and I never got to call a Conor McGregor fight. So, I worked for Cage Warriors when he was there, but I wasn't commentating. So I was always kind of a bit bitter about that, to be honest. But yeah, you do sort of get that, these guys who you thought like Nathaniel Wood, like it makes my job so easy. And I'll be happy to call his fights for the rest of my life, like for the next 5-10 years. But at the same time, you see these people, and I'm lucky as well in that I've seen a lot of people go from before Cage Warriors as well, because I have worked for a lot of the regional shows as well. I've seen guys, some guys like Molly McCann's probably a great example. Like I've commentated on Molly's fights as an amateur, and I've commentated on her early fights as a pro, and I commentated on the Cage Warriors world title fight, and then I was cage side. I don't think I commentated on a UFC London fight. But I was cage side that night commentating for BBC Radio, and I was the first person to give her a hug when she got out of the cage. So for me, seeing those guys go through Cage Warriors and then go on to fight in the UFC, it's kind of cool because you get to know these people and what their goals and dreams are, and to see people achieving them, it's just awesome. And then like Danny Roberts posted the other day, like a highlight video of his career, and I was just looking at it and I was like, oh mate, I remember when I called your fight against Jimmy Wallard in Liverpool. That was one of the, in terms of like my career, that was one of the proudest moments of my life, because like Judo Jimmy was the man from like the previous generation, and Danny was the man of that generation at the time. And seeing those two guys fight, and unfortunately, obviously, one of them has to lose, one of them has to win, but it was like a changing of the guard. It was like the new era coming through, and Danny getting a win in his hometown, like that for me was like a really, really proud moment. And to see Danny then go on to the UFC and have a great career, I'm like, oh, I called your fights years ago. That's pretty sweet. Like, so Yeah, it sucks because you want to carry on working with them and stuff, but at the same time, how cool is it seeing people that you've seen grow from like, teenagers in some cases, with a dream to people actually living that dream.
Good answer. This is Roddy Hater back. Is legit, bud. My background is karate, boxing, and backhold wrestling. Nah, it's on a wind up, that, isn't it? That's got to be something in a wind up.
Well, listen, man, the first ever martial art I did was Gokenru karate. So
was it? Yeah, I did a bit of wushu back in the day.
We could do like a wushu versus karate fight or something. Me and this guy, what's it, Roddy Hater, is it? We'll have like a Street Fighter 2 style wushu versus karate.
Roddy Hater, that is the one.
Yeah.
What do you think needs to happen in the UK to get us to the next level in general? What do you think is going to? I mean, I think the main thing we need to try and get wrestling in schools. Do you think that's ever going to happen? Do you think we're ever going to get there to like America's style?
As far as I understand it, with like in terms of like getting stuff into the education system, there's health and safety things that are in place now that make that difficult, having it as part of the curriculum. I think MMA is a long way off being part of the curriculum because obviously we're still trying to get recognition for it as an actual sport. Wrestling seems to be not massively popular over here. BJJ is getting a lot more popular, and I think, in all fairness, some of that has to do with MMA being popular as well, and people finding jiu-jitsu as a way in or something to do to supplement MMA. But look, we've still got boxing gyms all over the country. There seems to be very gradually changing attitudes on young children training and competing in boxing from a young age because of the head trauma, which is obviously something we're learning a lot more about now. The impact of concussions on children at a young age and brain development. For those reasons, I don't ever see anything like MMA or boxing as we understand it today being part of the school curriculum. I think stuff like that in England maybe will be extracurricular. We just don't have that cultural thing with wrestling or any of the grappling sports in terms of it being part of the education system that, say, America does. But look, what we do have now that we didn't have years ago was kids being maybe 6-7 years old and saying, I want to be like Paddy Pimblett or I want to be like Conor McGregor. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I didn't know who the sports stars were in MMA or I knew Frank Bruno or Mike Tyson maybe. And
Hulk Hogan.
That was kind of it. But you've seen at the moment little kids dressed as Conor McGregor and little kids dressed as Paddy Pimblett and stuff. So I think like nowadays, we're going to have a generation of kids coming up now who don't necessarily go through the route of, we're going to train boxing and then switch to MMA. They're going to start with MMA, and they are starting with MMA. So I just think it's all about developing the grassroots and crucially having these pathways in place. You look at the, there's an English MMA federation that's in the process of being set up at the moment. And what they want to do is develop like training pathways. So, gyms register with them, youngsters register with them, coaches register with them. And we do little simple things that haven't been thought about before, like making sure that everyone who's at an MMA gym teaching kids has been DBS checked. Just little things like that maybe people didn't think about before. Yeah. And all of a sudden, the idea of a young kid, maybe 6 or 7 years old, going to an MMA class isn't a weird thing anymore, and people won't turn around and be like, that seems a bit rough. It'll just be the same. Well, they're going to go do football, or they're going to go and do MMA. So I think just developing those early pathways, putting a structure in place, and obviously ultimately, that big goal that we've got of getting it recognised by Sport UK, getting funding from the government, so people can make careers out of coaching, etc. Athletes can get access to sponsorship to make it a viable thing to do, and not something that you need a family who can support you, or you need to be able to have like financial resources, or you need to work as well as train. Just to make those opportunities available for people.
Yeah, my kids have been doing it since they were 2. I absolutely love it.
There
Literally
you
2
go.
years old. It's dead simple. You know, we're not hitting each other in the head. We're doing animals, and then that progresses. Like, be a monkey, so you got your knees up, things like that. My eldest is 5 now. And he's still carrying on loving it. You know, he still does football and swimming as well, and it'll come to a point where he'll have to choose between what he's doing 5 times a week because it just gets a bit much. He's done it now. We've got 2 of him, so and it's 10 times a week we're doing something.
It's just great that it's great they've got the option. I don't have kids, so I don't really know massively like what's out there for younger kids.
It's not
what I see, you know, on social media, and obviously I have friends who own gyms who maybe do little kids classes and that. But that's kind of crazy that they've been doing this since 2 years old. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's not the norm, is it? But the class where he goes 12 gauge, and we've actually got a new program there. It's absolutely brilliant program. So hopefully, you know, other gyms will start taking it on board and get other people into it. Oh, what are all these new ones now? Oh God. Who are the best amateurs to look out for? I mean, would they have loads?
What, do we want names here or what?
Amateurs.
Amateurs, right. Well, one of the best amateurs in the world right now is Mohammed Makayev. I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. The guy's absolutely mustard. Obviously, born in Dagestan, I believe, but has been training and fighting essentially out of the UK for a long time now. That kid's absolutely nuts. And I think he's sort of indicative of the kind of guy that you'll be seeing in a few years' time, where they go through all these, pardon me, they go through all these IMAF tournaments, etc., and then they debut in the UFC. I think guys like Muhammad, you know, he's not going to have many pro fights before he fights in the UFC. So, you know, someone like that definitely one to watch. It's tough, man. You know, I really don't like sort of like singling people out, because as soon as like I look back on this after, I'm going to think of 10 more people.
I don't know how I remember everyone's name, to be honest. My memory's shocking.
You know, look, you're in the Northwest, for example, right? So, you know, look at the last few Budo shows, for example, and FCC shows. You know, there's been loads of great guys and girls on those shows recently. You know, Levi Steedman's very exciting fighter. You know, in terms of like the women's scene, you know, she's winning fights in loads of different ways. She's putting the yards in, and we talked about them already. You know, the amateur squad fighting out of Team KF over in Ireland. You know, the Shelleys, Taka, and all those guys. And again, I don't like mentioning names specifically because there's so many more that we forget. But they're guys that I've seen and I've commentated on their fights and just been like, whoa, you know, these guys, you know, these guys are not to be fucked with. These are like legit guys. Jamie Kelly, fighting out of, I believe he's fighting out of SBG Manchester at the moment.
Yeah,
I've seen him come up through the amateurs, and I've called his first 2 pro fights. And that guy's transitioned from amateur to pro incredibly. If you look at his first 2 pro wins, he's put his elbows to such great use. You know, his most pro fight, you were out, weren't you?
Yeah, brutal, yeah.
A couple of months ago, he made a right mess. You know what I mean?
It was bad.
So he's a guy with a really bright future. But you know, all over the country, these gyms are producing top guys. You know, look at Team Renegade in the Midlands at the moment under Tom Brees. The guys that are coming out of that gym, pro and amateur, absolutely insane. You know, guys like BKK in the southeast, they've always produced top level guys at pro and amateur, and it's no coincidence that you see, you know, these teams like SBG Manchester and BKK and Renegade, and they've not just got guys on the amateur regional scene, they've got guys that go up through the ranks and then eventually get to the top levels. So all I would say in terms of, you know, if you want to know who the best amateurs are at the moment, go and buy a fucking ticket, man.
Yeah.
25 quid, 35 quid. Go and buy a ticket to your local amateur show. Doesn't matter if you don't know a single guy on there. Like, if you enjoy fights, you know, you might not need to get there at 4:30, but get there at 7, watch the last 3 hours, and you'll have a great time.
Yeah, it's brilliant. You literally can't beat being there and watching it firsthand, can you?
There's nothing like it. And, you know, going to watch something like, you know, Bama or Cage Warriors is very different to going to watch like FCC or Golden Ticket. And then going to watch UFC or Bellator is very different to watching that other level of show. But it's not to say that it's any less entertaining. I've had some of my best nights as a fan at regional shows where there's been, 19 amateur fights, and I've been to UFC events where I've paid £300 for a ticket and come out of it thinking like, if you like fights, there's always something out there for you in MMA.
Do you think we'll ever get bare knuckle in MMA?
I
Think
hope
that'll
not.
ever be a thing?
I hope not. We grew out of that in the 90s, man. It's time to move on. I get that people kind of like it because they like the sort of outlaw nature of it, and it's controversial, and even some fighters like it because there are guys who compete and they want that raw competition. But I think if you look at it in like the bigger picture in terms of progressing MMA as a sport, we can't make excuses for things that don't need to happen. And you don't need to fight without gloves on, and you don't need to head stomp people or soccer kick people for MMA to be a good sport. Look, if you want to see that, get Fight Pass. It's £5 a month, and you can have your fill of soccer kicks and headbutts and stuff like that. But it just doesn't need to happen now. And again, going back to what I touched on earlier on, if someone gets hurt doing that, it's a bad look for everyone else who's doing things the right way. How do you excuse that in this day and age? Someone being allowed to headbutt someone else, someone being allowed to stamp on someone's face. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous almost. It's a relic of a time that's passed. So let's leave it in the past. And like you say, if you want to watch it, there's hours worth of footage on Fight Pass, or just go and find all like the old Vale Tudo stuff from Brazil, or the old Eastern European stuff, or the old League of Champion fights. It's all out there. Just watch it on YouTube. You don't need it anymore.
What about a 12-6 elbow? That's a bit of a midway one.
That's a stupid rule. We all know it's a stupid rule. And I'm sure it'll get changed eventually. Like, that's the one thing that whenever you see a referee get interviewed, whenever someone interviews like John McCarthy or Mark Goddard, and they always ask him, what's the one rule change? And it's always that one. It's daft. But, if that's the price we have to pay for MMA getting regulated back in the day, and that it was the New Jersey Commission that originally passed the unified rules of MMA, and that was like the main sticking point. So if that's what it's cost us, the 12-6 elbow, you know what I mean?
Over a block of ice, I believe. Over someone seeing someone cut through a block of ice,
like
it's
brick
banned.
breaking or ice breaking or something. But you're not in fact, you probably generate less force doing that than you would throwing an elbow over the top. So yeah, it's just one of those things. But if that's what it's cost us, then who cares, man? It's hardly small change at the end of the day, isn't it?
What do you think the worst knockout you've seen is? Like eye to eye, worst thing you've seen for brutality? I bet you've seen quite a lot. I bet you must be a bit immune to some violence to a certain extent now.
I do get that actually. Like, like sort of watching like films or news reports and stuff where like you see people getting knocked out or things like that, and it doesn't bother me. But I couldn't tell you if that is because of MMA, because I've been watching MMA since I was so young and watching combat sports since I was so young. I don't know if like it's just desensitized me to it, or I just wasn't particularly sensitive to it in the first place. In terms of like the scariest ones I've seen myself, Martin Sheridan versus Jordan Desborough at Cage Warriors years ago. Desborough shot for a takedown, so he level changed against the cage and got caught with a knee. And the momentum carried him forward. So he took the knee on the chin, but then his face went into the cage and his neck kind of went back. He was absolutely fine afterwards, but it looked horrible. And I was sat right in front of it. So literally like inches away. That's one of the worst ones I've seen in terms of like the pure shock. And I saw a bad one. I honestly couldn't tell you the guy's name, but it was two amateur guys in Amman in Jordan. And a guy got knocked out. It was just like a big shot, like a big right hook or something, but he didn't wake up for about 2-3 minutes, and they couldn't move him, and they were getting no response off him. And that's the only time I've ever been like genuinely scared, because I've never seen someone, 2 minutes is a long time. And when you actually sit there and there's no noise and everyone's quiet, and you've got the medics looking at someone. And again, the guy was fine, absolutely fine. Just didn't wake up. We couldn't get any response from him. But we're sat there at cage side. It wasn't going out live, but we were commentating on it just to get ourselves warmed up. And they kept the tapes and stuff. And I think they put them on Fight Pass afterwards. I'm not sure. Obviously, this was way before Fight Pass. But I think they are up there now, so you might even be able to see this fight. But we got to the point where the producers are like, "Well, keep talking," and we just said, like, "Guys, no, come on now, this is potentially serious." But again, the guy stood up and walked out. So yeah, what can you do? But yeah, I struggle to think other than that, really. But they're all bad at the end of the day, aren't they?
Yeah.
But yeah, like you say, I think when I'm seeing them sort of every weekend, I'm just like, I got flying kicked in the face. Who cares? Like,
I mean, my missus has been through a few now, and if I said to her 2 years ago, "You're going to go and watch an MMA fight," not a chance would that have happened.
Yeah.
Now she's been to a couple. She don't mind it as much now.
Yeah, she seems to have had a good time
quite surprised about.
Guys at Brough. But this is the thing, man. Like, it's one of those things. People might sort of see it as this. There's still the image of it, I suppose, as this kind of like
brutal cage
sport.
fight. That's the first thought. Yeah, brutal cage fight.
But it's a night out at the end of the day, and it's sport, and you get there and you enjoy the atmosphere. And I think more importantly, you see the guys after the fight giving each other a handshake and a hug, and sat there having a pint with each other afterwards, and you sort of realise that it's just a sport like any other. It's just this one, involves people hitting each other.
Chris Scadden saying he was there that night. I think might be going back to when you were talking about two of the guys fighting. Roddy versus Brad in the car park later. Tough Terry levels of promo here.
Tough Terry. That's a blast from the past. That was an old MMA like Twitter account, like a troll account on Twitter. That was fantastic. Tough Terry.
Roddy's saying he agrees in the wrestling sense, teaching in schools. Fraser Hirsch, who is now a cage fighter, struggled towards the end to keep the back hold going. Great sport, but poorly run up here in Scotland. Andrew Braswell, Jamie fucking Kelly.
Yeah,
that's all I remember. That's all I remember is his fans. Jamie fucking Kelly. Got a good following.
He has, and that's important, and you can't forget how important that is for these guys. Like, the sport is at a certain level where fighters need to be able to sell tickets still. It's only really like Bellator and the UFC and, maybe to some extent Cage Warriors in this country that can just rely on the brand. Like, if you want to be a success, you need to be able to market yourself and you need to have that fan base. And Jamie's got a good crowd that comes with him. So that's going to make it a lot easier for him to get fights on. I'm sure it's very easy for someone like Chris, who runs Budo, to say, look, well, this guy's going to sell 30, 40 tickets every time he fights. So it's easy for Chris to be like, right, I'm going to work hard to find him a good match. If he progresses to fight on other shows around the country, if they know that he can shift 50 tickets or 100 tickets, he's going to get on. And similarly, when you're looking at guys who are fighting on the slightly bigger shows, they need to be able to get on social media and market themselves and get a fan base. If you look at Conor McGregor before he signed to the UFC, his fans were just beasting Dana White on social media every day. Sign this guy, sign this guy. Dana White's getting 200-300 tweets a day, and every time McGregor fights, he's getting thousands. And to say that didn't play some part in McGregor getting signed would be false, I think. So, guys, need to take a look. If you go to an MMA show and you're thinking, well, I'm not getting the opportunities, and the next guy you fights has got 50, 60, 70 fans with him, well, that's the difference between you and them.
What about another one from Mickey White? Who's the GOAT? Who's a GOAT commentator?
You're looking at him.
Looking at him. Peter says it's Brian Lacey.
No comment.
No comment.
Nah, I like Brian, man. I'm only kidding. Like, Brian's awesome, but I am the best.
You like Joe Rogan? Do you say you're someone do you legitimately know?
As a commentator, yeah. I'm not a fan of his comedy, and I don't really get the whole podcast thing. Like, I've only just started listening to podcasts the past year myself, but I wouldn't say I wouldn't buy a ticket to see him do stand up. Put it that way. but as a commentator, he's a massive part of what the UFC has been over the past 20 years nearly. Has he been with the UFC 20 years now? It's got to be.
I believe so.
Got to be around that, surely. He I think he first started as like a backstage guy in the late 90s, so he's synonymous with it. Him and Goldberg, they are the GOAT commentary team, if you want to use that term. They're the ones that are synonymous with it. There's probably like color commentators that I prefer to Joe Rogan, and Mauro Ranallo is like my favorite play-by-play guy of all time. But I think as a duo, what Goldberg and Rogan did for the UFC, I don't think anyone's ever going to be a more influential duo than that. They're guys like Mike Goldberg's someone. I'm not going to say like I look up to him, but when I'm starting out and I'm like looking for tips and things, you watch the guys who are above you. I was a huge fan of John Gooden and Josh on Cage Warriors before I was commentating for Cage Warriors. So I used to watch. I was commentating for like small shows, and I would watch John and try and pick things up from him. So to be able to sort of fill his shoes was like a real sort of honor for me. I'm not saying I'd ever want to commentate for the UFC, but if you are in that position where you want to go and commentate for the UFC, then you could do a lot worse than copy the likes of Goldberg and Rogan.
Another one from Chris Gadden here. He says, try not to come across as a perv, which might be pretty hard. Hottest female fighter. How can you not come across as a perv, but you want to talk about the hottest female fighter? I thought you were going to say the hardest. He's going with Polyana Viana. Polyana, sorry. Who do you think the hottest is?
I don't know, man. That is a pervy question. So
I know, how can you can't put that first.
Okay, so I can't remember her name now, but there was a girl who fought on Cage Warriors who was on that Suicide Girls website.
I don't remember that.
She was pretty nice, yeah. My missus is upstairs listening to this, so I'm going to get in trouble here, aren't I? But yeah, whoever that was who's on the Suicide Girls.
Mine's literally just walked in. She must have heard the question. I'm pretty sure she heard the question because she just walked in. So no comment for me on that one. I prefer local shows to UFC.
Oh, no, I tell you what, hang on. Oh, I've forgotten the name. Right, give me a second. I'm going to get a name. Ask me another question. But I've got an answer, lads. I've got an answer.
I'll look at someone. Peter Knox, Bisping's very good at commentating. I actually agree with you there. Obviously, I'm a bit biased because he's my favourite fighter, but I do think he's really good at commentating.
He is, yeah. I think with Bisping, he's got that sort of entertainment factor as well.
Yeah.
I think like obviously for like UFC fans, he was always like a really good like pantomime villain. Like the Americans always used to boo him all the time. But such a long career and a storied career, and obviously very, very charismatic. Anytime he was on the microphone, and that season of Tough that many of us will have seen, and a lot of people, especially in this country, that might have been what got them into it. So seeing him go full circle, you feel like you know the guy anyway. So if you're a fan of him and his humor and everything, hearing him commentate on fights, and having that career, that's pretty cool because it's obviously something he's very passionate about, and he's got a good sense of humor on him.
Right. What about Will Vanders?
Will Vanders is the man. Will Vanders used to he used to be like a kickboxing and Muay Thai commentator in sort of the late 90s. He was on like the kickboxing show on Channel 4, and he did all the K1 for Eurosport. And fans now will know him as the voice of the English voice of KSW. And just if you put Will Vanders highlights into YouTube, you'll get like his commentary highlights, and some of the one-liners the dude comes out with are absolutely sick, man. I'd do some of them, but it wouldn't do him justice. But yeah, go and have a look for Will Vanders. He's also bizarrely the voice of the cartoon Rasta Mouse.
Right.
So there's that as well.
I don't watch that. It's banned in my house. Stuff like
Is
that.
it?
Yeah, no Rasta Mouse, no Peppa Pig. Not got time for it.
Not a Bellator fan, then.
No, don't really know. Don't really watch it much, to be honest. But I never used to watch Cage Warriors or the other small ones until I started doing stuff like this. It was just never on the radar. It's always
Okay,
just
so
UFC.
just to go back to that question for Scads, Rin Nakai,
I'm sure I've seen pictures of him about recently.
Rinakai, Rin Nakai. Google it.
Vindikai. Andrew Bay as well. I like it when Rogan schools Dominic Cruz commentating. Do you ever school anyone or feel like you're schooling anyone?
Nah, like my job's different to what those guys do. Like guys like Dominic Cruz and Rogan and Bisping and all those guys, they're what's called the color commentator. So they're there to add like a professional insight. So guys like Joe Rogan who have obviously Joe Rogan's a lifelong martial artist. He's a BJJ black belt, Taekwondo black belt. He's not fought in MMA, but he's got a very strong practical knowledge of mixed martial arts. Now, I'm really lucky on Cage Warriors to work with Josh Palmer, who's also a black belt. And, what he's there to do is to break down the technicalities into like understandable information and try and give people a sort of insight into the finer points of things. I'm kind of there to just like tell a story or just start shouting and make things sound exciting. So it's not really my place to like school anyone as such. In fact, it's more likely to be the other way around. But it's good to have a bit of a laugh sometimes. Like I've got a really good memory for fights and what happened in fights and stuff. So like sometimes Josh will say something and I'll be like, oh well, actually that's a little cigarette thing there. Actually, that's not exactly what happened. But obviously, when it comes down to like the finer points of the triangle choke, Josh would just twist my head off. So horses for courses, isn't it?
Dalby versus Houston, great fight, ended in a draw. Rematch, which will probably never happen. Who wins? That's from Roddy Hayter again.
Look, who knows what happens in a rematch? If you want my honest opinion, and I would never give an opinion on something like this if the two guys were both still in Cage Warriors, for example, because I think it's a bit unprofessional. And I've been asked to do it before. I've had fighters like on Twitter and stuff say, "Oh, who do you think should have won that fight?" And it's two guys that are on Cage Warriors. Like, first of all, I'm not a judge, so my opinion's pretty much irrelevant. But secondly, it's sort of, as someone who's like associated with Cage Warriors professionally, I don't think it's fair to comment. But seeing as both guys aren't in the UFC anymore, aren't in Cage Warriors anymore. Obviously, like Nick's back with the UFC now, and Ross has signed with Bellator. Look, my honest opinion was that Dalby was winning that fight, and he was seconds away from stopping it. The momentum was firmly in his favor. And don't get me wrong, Ross is hard as nails, great fighter. I think he's, if he can get that Michael Venom Page fight, boom, that's absolutely massive for him. But I think that Nick was winning that fight, and I think if that fight had continued, Nick would have won. As for a rematch, who knows?
Fair enough. Levi's on. She must have missed us. We've just been talking about it. Levi Steeman, who's your favourite female UK MMA fighter? Is it A, Levi Steeman, or B, Levi Steeman?
Depends how many Jaffa cakes you're going to give me.
Zach Ward, do you train UFC?
So that's my little brother. Bigger than me, to be fair.
Do you get that? Oh, I bet you get that asked quite a lot. Do you train UFC?
I train Cage Warriors.
Peter said he's a black belt in UFC, so. Ooh, tough one there from Ricky Shock. Top 5 events to watch on UFC Fight Pass.
Oh, man. So with this lockdown, like the number of times people have been like, "Oh, watch Fight Pass," and I've chucked events out there. So UFC 40 is one that I say people should watch quite a lot. That's Ken Shamrock versus Tito Ortiz. So that was when Shamrock sort of returned to the UFC after, I think he'd had a couple of fights in Pride, but he'd been doing WWF. And this was like the first fight back. Tito had fought a lot of his students and kind of ran through them all. So it was like a big veteran versus, current top guy. And that's sort of generally considered as the event that sort of saved the UFC. Obviously, the birth of the Ultimate Fighter was the thing that eventually carried it over into being, the company that we know today. But that UFC 40 was a huge event because the Zuffa had just taken over like maybe about 6 months to a year before, and it wasn't going well. And that was like the event that they made big money on for the first time. So great fights on it as well. You've got Robbie Lawler versus Tiki Gosen on that. You've got Chuck Liddell versus Renato Babalu. You've got Matt Hughes defending his title on it. And of course, that big main event of Tito versus Shamrock. So that's a great one. Pride 10 is another one that's worth checking out on Fight Pass. That's got the legendary Kazushi Sakuraba versus Henzo Gracie fight on it. It's also got another legendary Pride fight between Igor Vovchanchin and Enson Inoue. I think Rico Rodriguez, who was a UFC champion, is on that one as well. But it's just one of those events where every fight's absolutely bonkers. Pride Bushido 9, one of the best MMA events of all time. It's it's the first 2 rounds of a lightweight and a welterweight tournament. And there's so many big names on it. Dan Henderson, Takanori Gomi, Joaquim Hansen, Hayato Sakurai, just all the big names from back in the day in the lower weight divisions, all on the same card. And then just stuff like the Pride tournaments, which we don't have anymore. There's no one doing these kinds of events. The 2000 open weight Grand Prix, 2003 middleweight Grand Prix, which is light heavyweight. Pride called it middleweight. Yeah. You've got that tournament. The final 4 was like Vanderlei Silva, Rampage Jackson, Chuck Liddell, and I can't remember the other one. But it's just everyone's a big name. 2005 middleweight Grand Prix, 2004 heavyweight Grand Prix. All those are worth watching. They're all on Fight Pass. Get stuck in, man. Some incredible fights.
Yeah, definitely. Can't believe we've been on an hour and a half already. That's crazy. Do you train UFC? Right, so I'll finish these last ones. What's favourite UFC event ever? Don't think we covered that, did UFC event ever?
Probably a cheesy answer, but the first one I ever saw was UFC 3. So that'll probably always stand out for me. The first fight on that card was a karate guy who was about 5'8" and about 180 pounds, and he fought a sumo that was 6'8" and 500 and something pounds. So me being like about 13 at the time or whatever was like, well, the big guy's obviously going to squeeze this little guy to bits. And then he got brutalized, like the karate guy just knocked him over with an overhand right, and then landed about 50, 60 hammer fists on him. I'd never seen anything like it before, and that was like the time in my life where I was like, I'm going to watch MMA forever. So that whole event is just nuts. You've got Ken Shamrock's in it, the Hoist Gracie versus Chemo fight, and the Harold Howard fights is another legendary old school UFC guy. So yeah, UFC is probably my favorite event ever to go and watch back.
I think I'm right in saying Joe Howell is your missus. Is that a good guess?
Yeah. Am I in trouble?
Come on, who's the hottest female MMA fighter?
I've said Rin Nakai already.
That's quite bad in the shit. That is quality. Joe Rogan. Oh, I'm not reading that too much. TRT, no narcotics. I think we can finish out with the Facebook questions. Appreciate everyone asking the questions. Oh, go on after it. I used to enjoy The Cage. What was Brad's highlight from said show? Also, I seem to remember Brad rocking up night before an event to an old person's working men's club in Brighton or Bournemouth or something, but his story videos from that night were class. No idea if he remembers that from Matt Dossett. That means absolutely nothing to me.
I've got some vague memories coming back. So the cage was like a little TV show we used to do back in the day, like 2012 or so, just like profiling UK MMA fights and fighters and stuff. It's before I worked for Cage Warriors, when I was a journalist. Had some great times doing that actually. We got to give a few guys from Spotlight, get them into the studio, get them interviewed and stuff. It was good fun. And at the time as well, it was just nice to get paid to do something because, as I'm sure you're aware, like in the media game in this part of the world, opportunities to get paid are few and far between. So it allowed me to actually devote some time to it, and they were good times. As far as this working men's club thing goes, I don't want to drop myself in it. I'm getting vague memory. I'm gonna have to go back through some old Facebook statuses or something, but I think that's probably a conversation left for in the bar rather than on Facebook Live.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, thanks to everyone asking questions. I've literally got loads of stuff here I wanted to say to you, but it's Facebook took over. I will finish with, I need a winner and a method of victory. Don't think too hard about it. You just got to give your first initial response. Stipe versus Jones.
Stipe.
Winner and method.
Stipe, TKO late.
Khabib versus Tony.
Khabib by whatever he wants.
Peter Knox versus Scott McKinnon.
I don't know. Oh, right, yeah. We'll say Pete by Tenant Super TKO.
Lewis Smith versus Katie Hunter.
Depends who the baddest bitch is, doesn't it? I watched that video far too much, That was an awkward conversation with the missus as well.
Joe Exotic, Carol Baskin.
Joe's going to shoot that bitch in the face. Fuck.
Mark Modridge or Chris Clark?
What, in a fight?
Yeah, who wins? What method?
Mark Modridge all day.
Method?
Feeding Chris a bigger English breakfast than he could ever manage on his own.
Brad Wharton versus Brian Lacey.
Fighting or commentating?
Fighting.
I win both.
You win both. Confident. Dana White, Graham Boylan.
In a fight, Graham's a bad man.
You pick him anyway, though, wouldn't you? You pick him either way, wouldn't you?
Graham's a bad man.
Graham Boylan or John Jones?
Graham Boylan. Hey,
Graham Boylan or Stipe?
I know who pays my wages, my friend.
Stipe or Graham Boylan?
Graham Boylan.
On that note,
he's got that cork fighting blood in him. John Jones can't compete with that.
What do you think of recent John Jones news? Do you think we're going to see him back in, or it's just
of course
a shame?
you will. Of course you will. Whether the UFC will stick with him and carry on promoting him as they have done, who knows? But he'll fight again. He makes some money, so he'll fight again. I think. Look, Mike Tyson raped someone, went to prison, and came back and was promoted as a world champion. John Jones has done some horrible stuff, but he's not sort of plumbed those depths yet. And when there's money to be made, you'll keep seeing him back.
Oh, one more has just come in. Jesus, the Holy Saviour Christ, or Graham Boylan.
I don't believe in Jesus, so I'm going to have to go with Graham Boylan again.
There you have it. Hardest man on the planet, Graham Boylan. Cheers for coming speaking to us, Brad. It's been a pleasure. Can't believe how fast it's gone, to be honest. It's flown by. So I hope you enjoy your quiz that you've got coming up.
Yeah, I've got about 30 minutes, actually, so I'm not going to have any dinner now. But look, it's been a pleasure, my friend. I'm sure I'll see you at an event at some point before the end of the year, and I will bring you a couple of cans of nice craft ale.
Yeah, make sure you do. Nice one. Might even speak to you before then. Depends how long this lockdown comes on. Probably have you back. Take it easy.
All right,
Cheers, Brad.
take it easy, brother.
See you later. Cheers.